Hello and welcome to this edition of Pharma Faceoff. Today we're going to talk about one of the more controversial aspects of pharmacy design and management, which is copay assistance programs. So we're hoping for a lively discussion. Let's get started.
This episode of Pharma Faceoff is brought to you by
I have with me a very distinguished panel. We have Don Sawyer, who is VP of Payer and Pricing for Ironwood Pharmaceuticals. And over at the far end, we have Jeff Taylor, who's Pharmacy Director at Aetna. And we are going to debate or discuss one of the more controversial parts of pharmaceutical and managed care relationships today, which is patient copay assistance programs. So I'd like to kick off by turning the floor over to Jeff Taylor. Jeff, would you make a 2-minute opening statement for us, please?
Okay, from a health plan perspective, looking at copay assistance programs, the biggest challenge that we have with that is its impact on our formulary process. We want to make sure that our formulary process is followed by our membership, and the copay assistance programs sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes have an impact on that.
From an industry standpoint, 50 of the top 100 drugs prescribed now have a copay card program in place. Yet when you look at it in terms of dollars, we spend as an industry $30 billion on rebates a year, and we spend $4 on our copay program. So I think it's becoming a larger problem, maybe for the reasons that you state, Jeff, is that the industry on the managed care side is starting to feel threatened by what's coming forward. From an industry standpoint, I will say that, may this sound somewhat pedantic, it's good for patients. Patients can access products at a more affordable level. And also, I think the key for us in the industry is it allows patients or physicians to make decisions that aren't impacted solely by cost. And they can actually look at the clinical merits and the clinical attributes of a product and say, yes, I'd like to choose this, not I'd like to choose that, but I can't because of the cost that's set forth. So any impact that we can have on that is pretty much the same reason we started contracting with managed care payment and managed care companies to begin with.
Is not, in some regards, prescription drug copay assistance programs, are they not sort of the easy way out? Why don't manufacturers utilize tools such as things like comparative effectiveness research analyses or risk-bearing contracting? People in the industry always say they want to be partners with managed care, but isn't the discounting program actually a workaround, and wouldn't it be better if you really want to work with MCOs to use those paths rather than simply topping up the patient cost share?
You said you were going to be nice.
Everybody's got to get a fastball here, you know?
No, I think it's fair, and I think relative to comparative effectiveness, I'm completely supportive, as I think most of the industry is. I think where I struggle with is who actually does the research. If we do it as an industry, or industry brings forward the research, I think it's viewed, and stop me if I'm wrong, somewhat cynically, right, and how it was put forward.
Correct.
I think on our side of the fence, we look at when claims data is pulled and analyzed, we wonder how much weight is actually put on the component of price versus efficacy or the clinical benefit of the product or the reduction in safety or side effects, right? So there's that balancing fact where I think there's just a little bit of, somebody mentioned mutually assured destruction, right? We just don't trust each other completely relative to the data. If we were to partner on those trials and actually assign the weightings and actually looked at it completely level, I think the product should have to stand on its own. Similarly, I think the market has kind of limited the Me Too products anymore. I don't see too many more ARBs or calcium channel blockers entering the marketplace currently, right? Just for the sheer fact that success is pretty much predetermined there. Relative to risk-based contracting, I think it's fantastic, right? But it would be wonderful to do it. Unfortunately, the devil's in the details. And we've sat across the table from many payers and said, I'd really like to try this with you. And when you start thinking about it and they say, well, wait a minute, we don't know how that's going to come out. We don't know sure what's going to happen. There's too many variables there. And on the other side, to be completely fair from the pharma side, we say, I'm not sure what that's going to be either, but I can pretty sure predict national market share and what those tiers will look like. And when I do that analysis, I have a pretty good idea where that's going to land. Or at least if it doesn't, it's on me and I know why, right, for the most part. So I think no matter where you are, you end up back in the same kind of scenario where it's that lack of unassuredness or an idea of unpredictability, probably is a better word, where it's going to go that leads to us defaulting back to our traditional methodologies.
I agree, and I think that the challenge in terms of the details is digging into the data and being able to analyze the data at a member level that includes medical pharmacy, the total cost, and then figuring out where the line's going to be drawn. Do you, incorporate adjusted quality life years and those type of things, because there's certain components that will impact a managed care organization and other components that don't really impact the managed care's bottom line. Do you incorporate those? Do you not incorporate those? How is it going to be measured? How do you make sure that each of the components, you're pulling the data out that's going to measure that true outcome? Those are the type of details that we need to get to, and I think we're getting closer, but it's going to take some more pilot projects and working together to get there.
We all know that the federal government is plowing something on the order of $30 billion gross into healthcare information technology, particularly electronic medical records and health information exchanges, to try to get at some of the clinical information that you guys are talking about. Will that make this easier or harder?
I think it'll make it easier. I think the biggest component of healthcare reform is that health information exchange coming up. That is going to be huge in transforming and getting rid of waste within the system. Duplicate tests, duplicate diagnostic procedures that today there's no communication. That's going to help that, and with that then, and that compilation and that sharing of that data is definitely going to help in terms of looking at outcome at a patient level.
I think we've found a point of agreement, right? I completely agree. I think the fact that it's an open book, it's not a subjective data set, right? And we all know the inputs were, should lead to a way to actually sit across the table with objective data and say, let's try and move forward on this. Unfortunately, I think it's probably more predictive, to your point, on the medical cost side than it may be on the drug cost side. But we should be able to have some clarity there that we haven't had in the past.
When do the cost-sharing support programs become unaffordable? Is there an end game for the manufacturers on this? As health plans move increasingly to co-insurance, for example, as we see in most of the survey data?
Yeah, I think, to your point, there's a finite pool of resources for this, right? I mentioned, $4 billion in copay cards, $30 billion in rebates. I'm not so sure the industry is going to continue to expand its overall investment, right, relative to these terms. So there's going to have to be a cost shift. Do they walk away from payers completely and try to go through these seamless transitional copay cards, which go right to the patient, right, and circumvent your system, which is probably a significant judgment on the business model itself, right? Or do we just look for other ways to actually work together, right? To your point, do we continue to bat heads, or do we actually look for potential solutions out there? I think the end game is actually closer than we may realize, too.
We know that the Affordable Care Act contains, at least nominally, some statutory limits on out-of-pocket spending on policies sold through health insurance exchanges. So if there's a limit to cost sharing from that regard, does that put us back to the 80s from the managed care perspective on going back to closed formularies instead of stepped or tiered co-insurance, copay plans going down the road?
It's definitely something that's being looked at because again, we're trying to make sure that we provide a product that is affordable, an insurance product that's affordable and that meets patient outcomes. And so to do that, we need to be able to control those expenses. If there's a maximum out-of-pocket costs, the one way to do that, and we've seen this within Medicare plans also, is a movement more to closed formularies where we're blocking certain products to make sure we get that movement to the lowest cost alternatives. So that is a possibility. It's going to meet a lot of resistance from the public, but it's one of those balancing acts, again, that you need to try to balance what the overall cost of the product is versus the PR issues that come with that type of a closed formulary process.
The first thing to state on that is if you look at a closed formulary world, the underlying assumption of that, which I believe is flawed, is that all products are equal, right? That's what you basically just said, is all products in every class are equal.
Not every class.
From a theoretical standpoint.
Not every class.
I think how payers would react to that is going to be very similar to what I suggested around how we subsidize the Part D space or the Part D space there, which is just a cost shifting, right? Is there a way where do copay programs or offsets significantly increase? Do rebating programs significantly decrease? As I said, there's a finite amount of resource that we're going to apply to this, and at the end of the day, price is price, right? And it all comes off the net. So how we actually shift will be determined within that system, but clearly, and I think I stated it, and you probably did too, Jeff, I don't think it's the way we want to go from a public.
Is there a different way for plans and manufacturers to solve this patient cost-sharing burden problem?
Got me nervous there.
Big question there. I think the one area, and we touched on it briefly before, is outcomes type contracting, and that will work with specialty products. It'll work with certain classes of drugs. Other classes it won't work. So I don't think you'll be able to do that with all of the products, but with some of them, I think looking at outcomes and contracting on that basis, then we're aligned. We're all going towards the same goal.
Yeah, I think you've seen signs of the solution already in play in certain areas, and I think where I'd point most readily to is value-based insurance design. So if you look at what's happened with Pitney Bowes over the last couple of years and what they've done around diabetes and asthma, where they provided these medications free of cost to their employees, and they've seen an actual reduction in their overall medical spend, right? Again, providing their drug spend has obviously increased, but their overall utilization of services has gone down. And I think what you're looking at is just high-value medications, right? How do you provide a high-value service to the patients, which actually allows them to utilize those services? Because it's clear that once you raise the cost share, their utilization goes down, which may have been the goal at one point in time, but then again, as you said, utilization of services continues to go up and your overall cost is defeative. So I think value-based insurance design may be the one place where we can all meet together and say this could work. I think the struggle with that's going to be, the next argument will be, how do you define high-value service, right? And who defines high-value service, and how objective are you when you define it?
We're back to the data again.
Such we are.
Back to the data.
It appears that the employers are the missing party at this table. We have a pharmaceutical manufacturer health plan, but no employer, and they're the folks who hire people like Aetna to do this kind of work. So how do we bring employers into this discussion about cost sharing, copay support programs, and the like? What's the best way to attack that problem?
I think you need to look at it in different segments, fully insured versus self-funded, because employers look at they look at those two differently. I mean, a fully insured employer that's relying on Aetna to administer those plans for them and their premiums, they're focused on their overall premium dollar and their impact on their employees to keep them healthy. And so, we need to focus on that. A self-funded employer is much more digging into the details of where those costs are going, which segments are going, is what's happening with their specialty business versus, and their medical costs versus their pharmacy costs, in certain buckets or therapeutic categories. That's where I think it's really going to come down to those employers and looking at some of the details, again, back to the data. And plan and employer-specific data. They're pretty much demanding that. Getting back to your employer, your value-based insurance design, a lot of self-funded plans are looking at that. The fully insured business, if they're a small group, they're not as interested in that, unfortunately. but that's just the way, so it sort of has to be customized. The data and analysis around that has to be customized to each employer.
You hit on it right on top of it, Jeff. I think the issue is employers haven't been as engaged in this in the past. They've relied, and forgive me if I offend them, they've relied heavily on employee benefit consultants, right? And the easiest way for an EBC to sell or show their value is to decrease drug spend, right? And that's what the discussion has been about for a significant period of time. To your point, if we can get them actually digging into their overall data and going beyond the consultant and working with their providers and their plans, I think you can have a different outcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Will you join me in a big round of applause for our panelists this afternoon?